It all started with an envelope. Not just any envelope. This one was beige. Now, you might think, beige? What's so bad about beige? Let me tell you. Beige is not a color. It's a surrender. It's the color of doctors' office waiting rooms, of cubicle walls, of pants worn by men who have given up on joy. Beige is the official color of passive aggression. And this particular envelope, resting in my mailbox between a pizza coupon and a bill I was planning to emotionally ignore, radiated a passive aggression so potent it could curdle milk from 50 paces. It had the logo of the Maple Creek Meadows Homeowners Association stamped on it, a clip art image of a smiling oak tree that looked more like a smug broccoli floret. I knew, with the certainty of a man who has previously been fined for having a non-compliant garden gnome, that this was not good news. I took it inside, handled it like it was coated in something infectious, and placed it on the kitchen counter. For a moment, I considered just throwing it away. What Brenda doesn't know can't hurt me, right? Brenda is our HOA president. Picture a suburban dictator whose weapon of choice is a well-laminated binder of bylaws. But my curiosity, that treacherous little gremlin, got the better of me. I tore it open. The paper inside was, of course, also beige. The font was Times New Roman, because of course it was. The heading read, Regarding Community Ordinance 7.B-4, Recreational Structures. My blood ran cold. My trampoline. My beautiful 14-foot circle of glorious, gravity-defying freedom. I read the text, my lips moving silently, each word a tiny paper cut on my soul. Following a thorough review by the Architectural Control Committee, that's just Brenda and 2 other retirees who communicate exclusively by sighing, and in light of mounting insurance liabilities, documented noise complaints, and the paramount importance of maintaining aesthetic uniformity throughout our community. Aesthetic uniformity. The 3 most terrifying words in the English language. It's a phrase that promises a world painted in 50 shades of taupe. All recreational apparatuses, colloquially known as trampolines, are hereby prohibited, effective immediately. Residents have 30 days to ensure complete removal of said structures from their property. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines, as detailed in Appendix C. I crumpled the letter in my fist. A documented noise complaint? Was it my fault that the sound of pure, unadulterated joy was offensive to Brenda's delicate sensibilities? She once complained that my wind chimes were tonally aggressive. This wasn't about noise or insurance. This was about control. This was about Brenda. From her perfectly manicured lawn across the street, looking out her window and seeing a blight on her beige-tinted utopia. Me, a 32-year-old man, occasionally trying to see if I could bounce high enough to touch a cloud. They had banned joy. It was a declaration of war, and I, armed with nothing but righteous indignation and a dangerously impulsive personality, was ready to fight back. The first rule of war is to rally your allies. My first call was to Dave, my best friend, and the long-suffering voice of reason in the hurricane of my life choices. I put the phone on speaker, pacing my living room like a caged animal. "They did it, Dave. They finally did it," I said, my voice dripping with manufactured drama. "Did what?" he asked. There was a faint sound of crunching. He was probably eating cereal, completely unaware of the death of liberty in Maple Creek Meadows. "Did Brenda finally outlaw fun altogether?" "Close! She outlawed trampolines. My trampoline." "Oh, bummer," he said, the sympathy in his voice as thin as gas station coffee. "So you gonna put it on Craigslist?" I stopped pacing. "Craigslist? Craigslist? Dave, are you listening to me? This is tyranny. This is a gross overreach of power. You don't just surrender to tyranny and sell your weapons of joy for $50 to some guy named Chet." It's a trampoline, Leo, not the Declaration of Independence, he mumbled mid-crunch. It's not that deep. You used it like twice this year. The principle is the same. This is how it starts. First, they come for the trampolines. Then the slip and slides. Then, before you know it, we're all wearing gray jumpsuits and walking in single-file lines. Did you not see that one episode of Black Mirror? You just compared a trampoline ban to a soul-crushing technological dystopia. I think you need to take a deep breath. No, I need to resist, I yelled, a little too loudly. I peeked through my blinds. Brenda was watering her petunias, but her head was cocked in my direction. She has the hearing of a bat that feeds on non-compliance. Look, just take it down, Leo, Dave said with a sigh. Pay the fine if you're late. It's not worth the fight. She'll make your life a living hell. Too late for that, I muttered, hanging up. He didn't get it. Nobody got it. I took my plight to the group chat, the usual suspects. My message was simple and powerful. The HOA banned my trampoline. This injustice will not stand. The responses trickled in. Mike. LOL, that sucks, dude. Chris. HOAs are the worst. Ours tried to tell me my welcome mat was too whimsical. Jenna. Just hide it in the garage? They were offering condolences when I needed a rebellion. They were suggesting compromise when I needed a revolution. It was clear I was alone in this fight. A lone freedom fighter in a sea of placid suburbanites who had already surrendered their souls for the right to have perfectly coordinated mailbox designs. I was going to have to take matters into my own hands, and my hands, when backed into a corner, tend to find a keyboard and a search engine. That night my living room was dark, save for the pale, ghostly glow of my laptop screen. The mission? Find a way to fight back. The fuel? A family-sized bag of sour gummy worms, and the kind of spite that could power a small city. My first Google search was predictable. How to fight HOA legally. This led me down a vortex of mind-numbingly boring legal forums. Posts from people named Bylaw Bob and Legal Eagle 78 debated the finer points of covenant enforcement. It was filled with sane, rational advice like open a dialogue and petition the board. In other words, useless. My next search was more creative. Trampoline alternatives. The results were underwhelming. Pogo sticks? This isn't a 1950s sitcom. Inflatable bounce houses? I'm a man, not a 6-year-old at a birthday party. Slack lines? I have the balance of a newborn deer on a unicycle. This was getting me nowhere. I needed something bigger, something better, something that screamed, "You can't control me, Brenda!" I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The core of the problem was the word itself, trampoline. The letter was specific. It was a surgical strike against a single noun. They hadn't banned jumping. They hadn't banned falling. They hadn't banned the glorious feeling of launching yourself skyward. They had only banned the device. My fingers flew across the keyboard, guided by a spark of manic inspiration. I typed a question so beautiful, so pure in its logic that it should be embroidered on a pillow. What do movie people use for big jumps? The search results exploded onto the screen. And there it was, my salvation. The images were glorious. Massive, pillowy, inflatable bags in vibrant blues and reds. Keanu Reeves had probably jumped into one. Tom Cruise had almost certainly landed on one after leaping from a building. These weren't toys. These were professional tools. They weren't trampolines. They were airbags, deceleration cushions, fall protection systems. The language was technical, professional, and, most importantly, completely absent from the HOA bylaws. I clicked on a link, https://www.google.com/search?q=stuntsuppliespro.com. It was a whole new world. I scrolled past crash mats and fire retardant gel, and then I saw it. The gently used section, my heart hammered in my chest. There it was, sitting under a listing for a smoke machine. Stunt Pro X-Lander 50x50 Professional Airbag. The description was poetry. Engineered for falls up to 100 feet. Dual-chamber inflation for optimal energy displacement. Reinforced vinyl with patented soft catch technology. This wasn't a trampoline. This was a piece of high-performance safety equipment. Buying this wasn't an act of rebellion. It was an act of supreme responsibility. I glanced at the price. My stomach did a backflip that would have been illegal on my old trampoline. It was more than my car was worth. It was an objectively, catastrophically terrible financial decision. But then I pictured Brenda's face when a 50-foot by 50-foot, bright blue monument to my defiance inflated in my backyard. I looked at the wording in her letter again. Trampolines. Not a single mention of professional-grade deceleration cushions. It was a loophole. A loophole big enough to land a stuntman in. My cursor hovered over the Add to Cart button. My brain screamed, "Don't do it! Think of your savings! Think of the logistics!" But my heart, my spiteful, glorious heart, whispered, "Do it for freedom." I clicked. The confirmation email popped into my inbox a second later. "Thank you for your purchase," it chirped. A giddy, terrifying smile spread across my face. The war wasn't over. It had just been escalated. Dramatically. A week is a funny amount of time. It's long enough to almost convince yourself that you didn't, in a fit of spite-fueled madness, spend a down payment on a house for a giant bag of air. It's long enough for the initial thrill to curdle into a low-grade, simmering anxiety. Did I measure my backyard? What does a 50x50-foot square even look like in real life? How exactly does one inflate a whale? These questions were answered for me on a sunny Tuesday morning, heralded by the groan of stressed suspension and the high-pitched beep-beep-beep of a vehicle reversing. I looked out my window, and my blood turned to ice. It was a semi-truck. A full-blown 18-wheeler, long-haul freight truck was attempting to navigate our peaceful suburban cul-de-sac. The driver, a man with a beard that had seen more of America than I had, looked profoundly unhappy. He was executing a 47-point turn, his truck's air brakes hissing like an angry dragon with every adjustment. My neighbors began emerging from their homes, drawn by the commotion like moths to a very large, very loud flame. And there, on her perfectly manicured porch, stood the final boss herself, Brenda. She wasn't just watching. She was documenting. Her phone was held aloft, recording the entire suburban siege. She had a visor on and a look of grim satisfaction that told me she was already drafting a dozen new violations in her head. I scurried outside, trying to project an aura of, "Yes, this is perfectly normal, nothing to see here." "Leo!" Brenda called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Is this yours?" She gestured to the truck as if I had personally summoned a kaiju to block her morning jog. "Morning, Brenda. Just a little home improvement project," I chirped back, my voice an octave too high. The truck driver, whose name I learned was Gus, finally managed to park, taking up the entire width of the street and blocking 3 driveways. He hopped down from the cab, wiping his brow with a greasy rag. He held a clipboard. "You Leo?" he grunted. "The one and only," I said with false bravado. He stared at my house, then at the meticulously landscaped yards around us. He looked back at me, his eyes filled with a deep, weary skepticism. "You sure this is the right address, pal? This here is a 50x50 stunt bag. We usually deliver these to film sets in Burbank or, professional maniacs." "Yep, this is it," I said, clapping my hands together. "Just redoing the backyard, going for a softer aesthetic." Gus did not look convinced. He and his partner, Mike, A younger guy who just looked confused opened the back of the truck. They used a forklift to lower a pallet onto the street. On the pallet was a massive, tightly bound, rolled-up blue thing. It looked less like an inflatable bag and more like a captured god of the sea, subdued and wrapped in vinyl. It was colossal. Way, way bigger than I had imagined. They wrestled it off the pallet and onto my driveway. It landed with a heavy whoomph that shook the ground. "It's all yours," Gus said, getting a signature. "Good luck with your aesthetic." As the truck rumbled away, leaving a trail of diesel fumes and violated ordinances in its wake, I was left alone on my driveway with my prize. It was just me and a 2-ton, bright blue testament to my poor impulse control. Brenda was still on her porch, phone still out. She wasn't filming anymore. She was just staring and smiling. It was not a nice smile. My new purchase, now unrolled, covered my entire lawn like a great blue flood. It was clear that jumping onto it from ground level would be about as thrilling as falling over in a pillow factory. The whole point was the fall, the glorious, stomach-lurching descent. For that, I needed a launch platform. This was not a job for a DIY enthusiast like myself, whose last project involved assembling an IKEA bookshelf that ended up looking more like a modern art sculpture titled Failure. I needed a professional. I found Sal on a local contractor app. His profile picture was a grainy photo of a man in his 60s, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite, and a mustache that had probably been in a fist fight or two. His slogan was "Sal's Construction, we build it right. No fuss." He sounded perfect. Sal arrived the next day in a beat-up Ford F-150. He got out, took a long drag from a cigarette, and surveyed my property. His eyes landed on the colossal blue tarp smothering my grass. He didn't say anything for a solid minute. He just stared, his expression unchanging. "So," I began, trying to break the heavy silence. "As you can see, I'm working on a backyard recreation project." Sal took another drag. "I see a big, dumb bag of air, kid." "It's a high-performance deceleration device," I corrected him. "Professional grade." "Right," he said, the word dripping with sarcasm. He walked over and kicked it. It was like kicking a beached whale. "So, what do you need from me? You want I should build a fence to hide this thing from your neighbors?" No, I need something to jump from. I'm thinking a platform. Right here," I said, pointing to a spot next to the bag. 10 feet high, sturdy, wood, with a railing for safety and maybe some stairs." Sal turned his head slowly to look at me. He had the kind of gaze that made you want to confess to things you hadn't even done. "Let me get this straight," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You want me to build a 10-foot-tall wooden tower, basically a scaffold, next to a bouncy castle for movie stars, so you can jump off it." "It's not a bouncy castle, Sal. It's a stunt airbag," I insisted. "And yes, that's the plan. For acrobatic wellness." Sal actually coughed, a dry, rasping sound that might have been a laugh. "Acrobatic wellness," he repeated, shaking his head. "And I'm guessing the HOA, the folks who have a 30-page rule book on approved mailbox colors, they're thrilled about this wellness initiative." "They love community engagement," I lied smoothly. "It's all above board." He took one last, long look at the bag, then at me, then at Brenda's house, where the blinds in the front window twitched ominously. He sighed, a deep, world-weary sound, and flicked his cigarette butt into the street. "All right, kid. I'll build your jumping tower." I beamed. "Great!" "But," he said, holding up a finger, "my quote is going to include a weird job tax, and the check clears up front. I'm not getting lined by some suburban mom named Karen because you built a circus in your backyard. And my insurance does not, I repeat, Not cover anyone yeeting themselves into the next county? Her name is Brenda, I said, and deal. For the next 2 days, my backyard was a whirlwind of noise. The whine of circular saws, the thud of hammers, the sound of Sal occasionally swearing at a piece of wood. It was music to my ears. Every nail was a nail in the coffin of Brenda's beige tyranny. The neighbors stared, of course. Some looked confused, others annoyed. One of them, a dad named Greg, gave me a thumbs up over the fence, a silent salute between men who understood the need for a little backyard anarchy. When Sal was done, it was magnificent. A sturdy, pressure-treated wood platform, 10 feet high, with safe, reliable stairs and a railing at the top. It looked like a lifeguard tower for a pool of blue vinyl. Sal packed up his tools, took my check without a word, and just before he got in his truck, he turned to me. "You're a maniac, kid," he said. It was the highest compliment I'd ever received. The platform was built. The airbag was, well, it was still a very large, very flat thing. Now came the moment of truth. Inflation. The instructions I'd found online were vague, suggesting a high-powered fan or multiple inflation devices. My multiple inflation devices consisted of my own electric leaf blower and one I borrowed from my neighbor, Greg. I jammed the nozzles into the 2 inflation ports, secured them with duct tape, and flicked the switches. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The entire neighborhood's lights flickered for a second as my circuit breaker groaned in protest. The leaf blowers roared to life, and the great blue beast on my lawn began to stir. Slowly, majestically, it began to rise. It was like watching a mountain being borne in fast forward. Within 15 minutes, it was fully inflated, and it was glorious. It was bigger than my house. It was a shimmering, taut, bright blue monolith that blocked out the sun. It was the most beautiful and irresponsible thing I had ever seen. I immediately called Dave. "Get over here, now. We're making history." He arrived 20 minutes later, pulling up to the curb and just staring. His jaw was slack. He got out of his car and walked slowly toward my backyard gate, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and awe. "Leo," he said, his voice a reverent whisper. "What have you done?" "I've liberated us, Dave," I declared, gesturing grandly at my creation. "From the tyranny of the ground. You've built a cartoon in your backyard. Brenda is going to have an aneurysm." "Let her," I said. "But first we need a test pilot, and you, my friend, are it." Dave's face went pale. "Absolutely not. No way. I am not jumping off a wooden tower you had built by a guy named Sal onto a used bouncy castle from Hollywood." "It's a high-performance deceleration cushion," I said, "and Sal was a master craftsman. It's perfectly safe." It took 20 minutes of cajoling, guilt-tripping, and promising to buy him pizza for a month. But I finally got him to the top of the platform. He stood on the edge, peering down at the massive blue target below. He looked like a man contemplating every bad decision he'd ever made. "This is insane!" he yelled down at me. "It's science!" I yelled back. "Just lean forward." He took a deep breath, squeezed his eyes shut, and launched himself off the platform. His scream was epic, a high-pitched shriek of pure, unadulterated terror that echoed through the cul-de-sac. But then something amazing happened. The moment he hit the bag, the scream changed. It morphed from terror into a whoop of pure, childlike joy. He landed in the center of the airbag, which billowed around him like a gentle wave. He sank a few feet, and then lay there, spread-eagled, laughing hysterically. "Okay," he yelled, his voice muffled. "I'm not going to lie. That was amazing. It felt like falling into a cloud that doesn't judge you." That was it. That was all the confirmation I needed. My vision was real. I helped him climb down, his face flushed with adrenaline. While he was still high on the thrill, I dragged him inside to my kitchen, where I had already set up a whiteboard. Phase 1 testing is complete, I announced, grabbing a marker. Now for Phase 2, monetization. Dave stared at me. You're going to charge people for this? Of course! This is America. I drew a dollar sign on the board. I'm thinking a tiered pricing model. $5 for a basic jump from the main platform. $10 for a superfly jump, where you can do a running start. And for the real daredevils, $20 for the Eagle's Dare. A jump from the top railing. You cannot let people jump from the railing, Leo. You're going to get sued into oblivion. Nonsense, I said, waving him off as I scribbled on the board. I'll make them sign waivers. This isn't just a business, Dave. It's a service. We're selling pure, unadulterated joy. We're selling freedom, one jump at a time. Dave just shook his head, but he was smiling. You're a madman, a complete and utter madman. I know, I said, grinning back at him. Isn't it great? You don't really need a marketing plan when you have a 50-foot bright blue inflatable mountain in your backyard. It's its own advertisement. The day after the inaugural jump, the whispers started. By the time school let out, the whispers had become a full-blown pilgrimage. I was in my kitchen making a sandwich when I heard it. A tentative knock on my side gate. I peered out and saw 3 kids, probably around 12 years old, bikes scattered on the pavement behind them. One of them, a kid with a shock of red hair and a spray of freckles, was the designated spokesman. Mister? He called out. Is it true? Do you have the giant jumpy thing? I swung the gate open with a flourish. Welcome, gentlemen, to the Apex Drop Zone, I announced, a name I'd come up with 30 seconds prior. And yes, the giant jumpy thing is open for business. Their eyes went wide as they saw the full scale of the airbag and the wooden tower. It was like they were seeing Mount Everest for the first time. Whoa, the spokesman breathed. How much? Asked his friend, a short, stocky kid holding a skateboard. I laid out my pricing structure, which I had neatly written on a piece of cardboard propped against a lawn chair. $5 for a simple jump, $10 for a superfly. They pooled their money, a crumpled collection of dollar bills and quarters, and handed me $5. The red-headed kid went first. He climbed the stairs with the cautious reverence of a pilgrim ascending a sacred temple. He stood at the top, looked down, looked at his friends, took a deep breath, and jumped. A perfect cannonball. He disappeared into the blue vinyl with a soft thwomp and emerged a moment later with a massive grin on his face. That was awesome! That's all it took. The floodgates were open. For the rest of the afternoon, my backyard was the most popular spot in a 5-mile radius. I had a line forming at the gate. I was collecting cash in an old Nike shoebox, feeling like a suburban kingpin. I instituted some basic safety rules on the fly. No flips on the first jump, I'd yell. 1 person on the platform at a time. Take your shoes off. It was a beautiful cross-section of the neighborhood youth. There was the hesitant girl who spent 10 minutes at the top before finally taking the leap, after which she immediately ran back into line. There were the high school kids, too cool for anything, who tried to act unimpressed but couldn't hide their grins after landing. There was the aforementioned skateboard kid, whose name was Timmy, a natural daredevil who immediately paid for a superfly and tried to do a kickflip mid-air. He failed, but with style. He became my first and most loyal regular. Even a few adults got in on the action. Greg from next door came over, beer in hand. My kids won't shut up about it, he said. I gotta try. He paid his $5, climbed the tower, and jumped with the gleeful shout of a man temporarily escaping his mortgage payments. He landed awkwardly, let out a groan, and spent 5 minutes catching his breath, but he had a smile on his face. Worth it, he wheezed. I was a mogul, a backyard baron. I was providing a service, bringing joy to the masses, and making a tidy, untaxed profit in the process. I was living the American dream. Of course, I should have known that in Maple Creek Meadows, the American dream is subject to review by the Architectural Control Committee. The sound of my gate latch clicking open with sharp, metallic authority cut through the happy chatter of the jumpers. The line of kids went silent. There, standing with the posture of a drill sergeant who just found a scuff on a private's boot, was Brenda. She wasn't holding a phone this time. She was holding a clipboard. It was somehow more terrifying. "Leo," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "Brenda," I replied, my voice a symphony of forced cheerfulness. "Welcome to the drop zone. A simple jump is only $5. All proceeds go to the, Community Fund. Her eyes, which were small, dark beads of pure judgment, scanned the scene. The line of customers, the shoebox of cash, the 10-foot tower, the colossal airbag. "The Community Fund," she repeated, as if the words themselves tasted foul. "I see." She clicked her pen. It was the loudest sound in the world. "Let's see," she said, consulting her clipboard. "First, we have an unapproved, non-permitted structure exceeding 6 feet in height. That's a violation of Article 7, Section B. Click. Second, we have the operation of a commercial enterprise in a residential zone, a clear violation of Bylaw 11. C. Click. Third, your deceleration device is causing a significant visual blight and is not in keeping with the established aesthetic of the community. Article 4, Neighborhood Harmony. "Actually, Brenda," I began, deciding to fight legalese with legalese. "I consulted a contractor. Sal assured me the platform was built with non-permanent bolts, which technically classifies it as a temporary recreational apparatus, not a permanent structure. It's no different than a large play set." She narrowed her eyes. "And the commercial enterprise?" "A common misconception," I said, puffing out my chest. "This is a private club. The money is simply the suggested donation for membership. The Community Fund is a registered non-profit. I had, in fact, spent 10 minutes online creating a GeoCities page for it. It was as legitimate as a $3 bill. "A non-profit," she said, her voice dangerously flat. "And is your club insured, Leo? What happens when one of these children—" She gestured to skateboard Timmy, who was patiently waiting for his next jump. "Lands the wrong way? Who will be responsible then?" "That's covered," I said confidently. "I have waivers." I held up a slightly damp piece of paper I'd just had a 10-year-old sign. Brenda looked at the waiver, then back at me. A slow, chilling smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a predator who knows the chase is already over. "I see," she said. "Well, Leo, we'll let the board, and perhaps the city's code enforcement office, decide about your club and its waivers." She turned on her heel and marched out, the clipboard held firmly at her side. The kids in line looked at me, their faces full of concern. "Is the jumpy thing gonna get shut down?" one of them asked. "Never," I declared, with more confidence than I felt. "The drop zone is here to stay." But as I watched Brenda cross the street and disappear into her beige fortress, a cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. I had won the battle of wits, but she was about to bring in the heavy artillery. 2 days later, the heavy artillery arrived in the form of a Ford Crown Victoria with Maple Creek Police Department written on the side. It rolled down the cul-de-sac and parked directly in front of my house. The joyous shrieks of jumping children died instantly. It was like someone had hit a mute button on fun. 2 officers got out. The first was older, with a graying mustache and a weary look in his eyes that suggested he'd seen every form of human stupidity and was profoundly unimpressed by all of it. This was Officer Miller. The second was younger, clean-shaven, with a ramrod-straight posture. He looked like he was fresh out of the academy and still believed in things like order and following the rules. This was Officer Garcia. I walked to the front of my lawn to meet them, my heart doing a nervous tap dance against my ribs. I adopted my most responsible, law-abiding citizen pose. "Good afternoon, officers," I said. "Anything I can help you with?" Officer Miller sighed, the sound of a man who would rather be anywhere else. "Son, are you the proprietor of this, He glanced over my shoulder at the giant blue airbag looming over my roofline. "This situation?" "I'm Leo," I said, extending a hand, which he ignored. "And yes, this is my community recreation initiative." Officer Garcia had a notebook out. "Sir, we received a call about a public nuisance and a possible unlicensed business being operated at this address." "It must be a misunderstanding," I said smoothly. "This is a private club for acrobatic wellness." I was starting to really like that phrase. It sounded so legitimate. Officer Miller's expression didn't change. "Acrobatic wellness," he repeated, deadpan. He looked at Garcia, who was fighting a losing battle against a smile. Garcia quickly coughed and stared down at his notepad. "Sir, can we see your business permit?" Garcia asked, all professionalism. "As I said, it's a club, membership-based. The money collected is for upkeep and community outreach," I stammered, realizing how thin it sounded out loud. "Right," Miller said. He gestured toward my side gate. "Mind if we take a look?" I led them into the backyard. The half-dozen kids who were there looked like they'd been caught in the middle of a bank heist. They were frozen, some mid-climb on the stairs, others halfway to the gate. The shoebox of cash sat on the lawn chair, looking incredibly incriminating. Officer Miller walked over to the platform and knocked on one of the support beams. He looked up at the top, then over at the airbag. He walked over and poked the airbag with his nightstick. It jiggled. He was silent for a long time. I could feel sweat trickling down my back. "So," he finally said, turning back to me. "Let me get this straight. The HOA, and I'm guessing I know which neighbor called this in." He glanced toward Brenda's house. "Banned your trampoline. So you bought that?" "It's safer, officer," I blurted out. "It's professional grade, used in movies. It's about harm reduction, fewer trampoline-related injuries in the community." Officer Garcia finally cracked. A snort escaped his nose, which he quickly disguised as another cough. "Did you, conduct any safety inspections, sir? Do you have liability insurance for this club?" "I have waivers," I said, pointing proudly to my stack of papers. Miller picked one up and read it. His mustache twitched. "I, the undersigned, agree not to sue Leo if I get super bounced," he read aloud. He looked at me. I have never felt so small in my entire life. He folded the paper and handed it back to me. "Son," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit, I really do, but you cannot run an unlicensed, uninsured amusement park in your backyard. This waiver isn't worth the paper it's printed on. You are a lawsuit waiting to happen." "But it's not a trampoline," I argued weakly. "There's no rule against airbags." "There are rules against negligence, against unlicensed businesses, against unpermitted structures. You're ticking a lot of boxes here," he said. He pointed at the kids. "Send them home. Shut it down for today. This is an official warning. We don't want to come back. Because if we have to come back, we're coming back with people from the city, and they don't give warnings." I nodded, defeated. "Yes, officer." They walked back to their car. Just before he got in, Officer Garcia turned back to me, a glint in his eye. "For what it's worth, sir," he said, his voice low. "It looks pretty fun." Then he got in the car, and they drove away. The kingpin had been dethroned. The drop zone was, for the moment, closed. A warning. That's all it was. Not a shutdown order, not a fine. Just a friendly neighborhood suggestion that I was courting financial and legal ruin. To a normal person, this would have been a wake-up call. A sign to deflate the whale, dismantle the tower, and admit defeat. But I am not a normal person. To me, it was a checklist. They wanted safety. They wanted legitimacy. Fine. I would give them legitimacy. My version of it, anyway. My first stop was an office supply store. I returned with a ream of official-looking paper, a laminator, and a pack of high-visibility yellow safety vests. My going legit montage was a sight to behold. First, the waivers. The super bounced waiver was clearly not cutting it. I spent an hour on the internet, cutting and pasting terrifying legal jargon from various online templates. My new waiver was a masterpiece of intimidation. It was 2 pages long, single-spaced, and included phrases like indemnify and hold harmless, inherent risks, and assumption of personal liability. It was so dense and unreadable, I was sure no one would ever actually read it. Which was the point. They'd just be scared into signing. Next, safety protocols. I bought a cheap plastic whistle. I was now the official jump master. I created a laminated rules of the bag sign and hung it on the platform stairs. The apex drop zone. Official rules. 1. Have fun, but safely. 2. 1 jumper on the platform at a time. 3. No sharp objects. Keys, phones, pet wolverines, etc. 4. Jumpers under 18 require a signed waiver from a parent guardian. 5. All jumpers must wait for the jump master's, that's me, whistle signal. 6. Brenda is not allowed. The last rule was non-negotiable. Finally, the safety vests. I decided that anyone waiting in line would have to wear one. Did it actually make them safer? No. But did it look official? Absolutely. My backyard now had the vague, confusing aesthetic of a construction site that was also a children's party. I stood back and admired my work. The laminated sign gleamed in the sun. The waivers sat in a neat, intimidating stack. The shoebox was replaced with a metal cash box that had a key. This wasn't just some fly-by-night operation anymore. This was a legitimate, safety-conscious, waiver-protected recreational club. I had addressed all of the officers' concerns. I was practically a pillar of the community. The next day I reopened. The kids were hesitant at first, intimidated by the new rules and paperwork, but the lure of the bag was too strong. Parents came, read the terrifying new waiver, hesitated, and then signed it, their desire for 30 minutes of peace outweighing their fear of legal ramifications. The apex drop zone was back in business, more legitimate than ever, and I was sure, with my new laminated veneer of responsibility, that I was untouchable. My newfound legitimacy, as flimsy as it was, gave me a dangerous surge of confidence. I felt like I had outsmarted the system. The business was booming, the kids were happy, and Brenda was, for the moment, suspiciously quiet. This, I would later learn, is known as the calm before the storm. The catalyst for the storm came not from a clipboard, but from a smartphone. Skateboard Timmy, my most loyal customer, had filmed one of his more daring jumps, a running superfly with a mid-air star jump, and his older sister had posted it on the town's community Facebook page. The caption read, "My little brother is a legend at the new neighborhood jumpy thing, so cool." The post blew up. Within hours it had hundreds of likes and comments ranging from, "OMG, where is this?" to, "That looks incredibly dangerous," to, "I bet Brenda Henderson hates this." The post was a digital bat signal, and it was answered by Channel 8 Action News. I got an email from a producer. They wanted to feature my unique community attraction for their On the Bright Side segment, a human interest story. My heart swelled with pride. This was it. Vindication. The media was on my side. They saw what I saw, not a nuisance, but a source of joy. I immediately agreed. The reporter who showed up was named Jessica. She was young, relentlessly enthusiastic, and had teeth so white they were a hazard to aviation. Her cameraman, a weary-looking guy named Carl, started setting up while Jessica grilled me. "So, Leo, this is just fantastic," she chirped. "What an amazing story. Tell me, what inspired this unique solution to a common suburban problem?" I puffed out my chest. The camera was on me. This was my moment. "Well, Jessica," I began, trying to sound like a visionary, "I believe in the American dream, and that dream is about freedom, the freedom to pursue happiness, and sometimes that happiness involves jumping from a reasonable height onto an unreasonably large bag of air." I gave her the whole tour: the professional-grade bag, the custom-built platform, my extensive and recently laminated safety protocols. I had the kids wear their yellow vests and sign waivers on camera. It all looked so official, so wholesome. I was feeling great about it. Then Jessica said, "This is wonderful. Now, for the sake of a balanced story, we did reach out to the HOA president for a comment." My blood ran cold. "Oh, you did?" "Yes. She was more than happy to speak with us." The segment aired at 6 p.m. that night. My part was okay. I came off as a charming, slightly unhinged man-child, which is fairly accurate. They showed kids laughing and jumping in slow motion, set to upbeat stock music. But then they cut to Brenda. She was standing in her pristine garden, clutching a rose as if for emotional support. The camera was angled up at her, making her look like a beleaguered saint. "It's not about fun," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "It's about safety. It's about our property values. Every day I live in fear that I'm going to hear a siren. This isn't a community, it's a lawless carnival." Tears welled in her eyes. "This used to be a quiet neighborhood. Now I don't know what it is." The story ended with Jessica in the studio, a concerned look on her face. "A backyard daredevil or a neighborhood nuisance?" she asked the camera. "A debate raging in Maple Creek Meadows. We'll let you decide." My phone started buzzing off the hook. But the calls weren't from friends congratulating me. They were from people I didn't even know. Thanks to the news report, my little backyard venture wasn't a local secret anymore. It was a public spectacle. The news story had an unintended side effect. It was incredible advertising. The next Saturday, my cul-de-sac was packed. Cars I'd never seen before were parked up and down the street. People had come from neighboring towns, kids in tow, all wanting to try the giant airbag from the news. My shoebox, no, my professional metal cash box, was overflowing. The line snaked out my gate and down the sidewalk. It was a festival. I was overwhelmed. I called Dave in a panic. "I need backup! Bring speakers!" He arrived to find utter chaos. "Leo, this is out of control!" he shouted over the noise. "Isn't it beautiful?" I yelled back, directing a kid to the waiver station. To celebrate my success and mark the end of summer, I had declared this day the end of summer jumpathon. Dave set up his Bluetooth speaker and started blasting a playlist of 90s pop hits. I bought a pack of hot dogs and started grilling. It was a full-blown party. A block party that just happened to be centered in my backyard, and for which I was charging admission. For a few hours it was pure, chaotic bliss. The energy was electric. But then, the cracks started to show. A couple of teenagers, fueled by bravado, tried to do a synchronized jump. They collided mid-air and landed in a tangled heap, laughing but shaken. Then some college kids showed up, clearly having come from a pre-party. I had to institute a strict, no visibly intoxicated jumping rule, which did not go over well. The peak of the madness, the moment I knew I had flown too close to the sun, came when I saw skateboard Timmy and two of his friends on my roof. They were looking down at the airbag, then at each other. They were actually contemplating it. "Timmy!" I screamed, my voice cracking. "Get down from there right now!" I scrambled up the platform and onto the low roof of my garage. "Are you insane? You can't jump from the roof!" "But it'd be so epic," he yelled back. I managed to talk them down, but the damage was done. Across the street, a figure stood on her lawn, phone held high, capturing the entire rooftop showdown. Brenda, of course. She had her smoking gun. That's when the first police car arrived, then a second. This time it wasn't just Miller and Garcia. It was them, plus two other officers, and a woman in a crisp, city-issued polo shirt holding a very official-looking binder. She was not smiling. Officer Miller stepped out of his car, and his face was a mask of profound disappointment. He looked at the line of people, the cars clogging the street, the hot dog smoke, the airbag, and then me. "Leo," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "we need to talk." The party was over. The arrival of 4 police officers and a woman who radiated bureaucratic fury has a remarkable effect on a party's atmosphere. The music fizzled out. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Parents grabbed their kids, suddenly remembering they had other, less legally precarious places to be. In less than 10 minutes, my bustling festival had evaporated, leaving behind only me, Dave, and the lingering smell of burnt hot dogs. The woman in the polo shirt marched into my backyard. Her name, according to her ID badge, was Janice, and she was from the City Code Enforcement Office. Janice did not look like a fan of acrobatic wellness. "Mr. Collins," she began, her voice as sharp as a freshly printed citation, "I'm here in response to dozens of complaints, a police report, and a rather illuminating local news segment." Officer Miller stood behind her, arms crossed, looking like a dad who wasn't mad, just disappointed, which is so much worse. Janice opened her binder. "Let's see. We have an unpermitted structure, a violation of City Ordinance 113.8, the operation of an unzoned and unlicensed public amusement, a violation of 204. A. Violation of residential noise ordinances, creation of a public nuisance. Shall I continue?" I opened my mouth to argue, to bring up my temporary apparatus theory, my non-profit club, my beautiful laminated waivers. "Don't," Officer Miller said, his voice quiet but firm. It was a simple word, but it carried the weight of 1,000 future legal fees. I closed my mouth. Janice pulled a document from her binder and handed it to me. "This is an official cease and desist order. You are to immediately halt all operations. You have 48 hours to completely dismantle the unpermitted structure and remove the inflatable device from your property." She then handed me another sheaf of papers. "And these are your fines. We've been lenient, for now." I looked down at the papers. The numbers had a lot of zeros after them. More zeros than were currently in my bank account. The fine for the unpermitted structure alone was $5,000. "But the wood is pressure-treated," I squeaked, a last desperate defense. "That's the good stuff." Janice did not seem impressed by the quality of my lumber. She gave a curt nod to Officer Miller. "The city thanks you for your assistance, officer." Miller walked over to me after she had marched out of my yard. "It's over, son," he said, not unkindly. "You had a good run. You flew your flag. But now it's time to deflate the whale." He looked over at Brenda's house. She was standing in her front window, arms crossed, a look of smug, absolute victory on her face, a look that said, "I have crushed your joy, and the world is beige and orderly once more." I had lost the war. My glorious blue rebellion was over. The next 48 hours were a blur of humiliating manual labor. Dave, being the true friend he was, came over to help. The first step was deflating the airbag. We opened the exhaust ports, and with a long, sad sigh, the Stunt Pro X-Lander 50x50 slowly collapsed in on itself, until it was once again just a giant, lifeless blue tarp on my lawn. Folding it took 4 hours and almost ended our friendship. Then came the call to Sal. "Sal, it's Leo," I said into the phone. "Let me guess," he rumbled. "The circus is leaving town and you need me to tear down the clown tower." "Something like that," I mumbled. He charged me half of what it cost to build it, which I paid without argument. The weird job tax, it seemed, also applied to deconstruction. He dismantled the platform with a grim efficiency, leaving no trace except for some sawdust and a few deep impressions in the grass. When it was all done, my backyard was just a backyard. A sad, empty rectangle of dirt and grass, with a giant 50x 50-foot brown patch in the middle, where the airbag had smothered the lawn. A crop circle of failure. I sat on my back porch with Dave, nursing a beer. We stared out at the empty space. It was quiet. Too quiet. "Well," Dave said finally, breaking the silence. "That was a thing. You went out in a blaze of glory, I'll give you that." "I'm broke," I said, looking at the stack of fines on my patio table. "I'm probably on some kind of HOA watch list, and my lawn is dead." "But for 2 weeks, you were a king," he said. "The king of a very small, very bouncy kingdom." He took a sip of his beer. "You learned your lesson, right? No more fighting the HOA. You can't win." I stared at the brown patch of grass. I thought about the thrill of the first jump, the sound of kids laughing, the look of pure victory I'd imagined on my face. And then I thought about Brenda's smug expression in the window. "Oh, absolutely," I said, turning to Dave with a solemn nod. "Lesson learned. You can't fight them on their turf. You can't beat them with structures and bylaws. You have to be smarter, more mobile." "Good," Dave said, looking relieved. "I'm glad you finally come to your senses." I leaned in, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But Dave, I was just looking at the bylaws again, just for fun, and it says nothing, and I mean nothing about zip lines." Dave froze, his beer bottle halfway to his lips. He slowly lowered it. "No," he said. "Think about it," I said, my energy returning, the familiar manic spark igniting in my chest. "A portable, non-permanent, cable-based recreational transport system. We could anchor it to that big oak tree in my yard and the one in Greg's yard. He'd be totally on board." "Leo, no. We could charge for rides. It's not a structure, it's just a cable. There's no noise. It's a loophole, Dave, a glorious high-tensile steel loophole." Dave stood up. He finished his beer in one long swallow and set the empty bottle down with a decisive clink. "I'm going home, Leo," he said, turning and walking towards the gate. "Just think about it," I yelled after his retreating back. "We could connect all the trees. It could be a neighborhood transportation network." He didn't turn around. He just raised a hand in a weary wave and disappeared through the gate. I was alone again, sitting on my porch, surrounded by the wreckage of my last great idea. I picked up my phone. The screen illuminated my face in the twilight. My fingers tapped out a new search, used commercial-grade zipline kits for sale. The results started to load. I smiled. The war wasn't over. It was just going aerial.